Hello, friends, and welcome back to another round of stories about entitled people. Today's story takes us to a gated community where one act of selfishness turned dangerous. A disabled man fell and lay helpless for half an hour, all because an entitled driver blocked the only wheelchair ramp. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. All right, let's get into it. A driver blocked a handicap ramp in my complex, causing a disabled neighbor to fall. Tonight, my partner and I were taking our usual evening walk around our gated community when something immediately stopped us in our tracks. Near one of the units, right by the parking lot, a man was lying on his back next to an open car door. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought it was a medical emergency. We rushed over and quickly realized he'd been there for at least 20 or 30 minutes, just waiting for anyone to come by and help. He explained he was disabled and used a walker to get around. The reason he'd fallen? Some entitled jerk in a shiny new Mercedes had parked directly in front of the wheelchair ramp. Not slightly near it, not half over it, but blocking it completely. The car wasn't even running, no lights on, just sitting there like it owned the place. Apparently, when he realized he couldn't use the ramp to get back up to his unit, he tried to maneuver down the curb to reach his car, and that's when he fell. I was furious. My partner helped him up, and we got him back into his car, making sure he was okay. We offered to call for medical help, but he refused, saying he was just shaken up and embarrassed. Still, I could see the pain and frustration in his face, not just from the fall, but from being treated like his needs didn't matter. Once he was safely settled, I went into full-on rage mode. I walked around the parking area, taking photos of the Mercedes, license plate, Freemason badge, everything, and counted at least 6 other open parking spots nearby. 6, all within easy walking distance. But no, this entitled piece of garbage had to park directly in front of a clearly marked ramp. I immediately called maintenance to get the car towed. Unfortunately, the night shift maintenance guy was new and didn't have the authorization code needed to request a tow on private property. He apologized, but I could tell he really didn't know what to do. So I called and emailed the leasing office, sending all the photos and a detailed description of what had happened. While waiting for a response, I even started looking for towing information signs, anything with a direct number to call. I was ready to handle it myself, but when I came back a few minutes later, the Mercedes was gone. Of course, the coward must have realized people were starting to notice and took off before facing consequences. What really gets me is how preventable this was. I don't understand how someone can be so lazy and self-absorbed that they think their convenience is worth risking someone else's safety. It takes all of 2 seconds to read a sign or notice that blue paint and a ramp mean "don't park here." But no, this driver decided he was above basic human decency. I don't know if the driver in that Mercedes will ever face real consequences, but I hope karma does what it does best. Blocking accessibility ramps isn't just inconsiderate, it's dangerous. I'm just glad we happened to walk by when we did, because that poor man could have been lying there even longer, all because someone couldn't be bothered to park 20 feet further away. This right here is why I can't stand entitlement. People like that Mercedes driver treat accessibility as an inconvenience, like ramps and blue zones are suggestions instead of literal lifelines for disabled folks. The guy wasn't just blocking a ramp, he was cutting off someone's only safe way home. Honestly, I'd be hunting that license plate down like a side quest for justice. It's not about revenge, it's about accountability. Because people like that Mercedes driver only learn when someone forces them to. And our second story. The day HOA Karen thought she controlled my backyard. We'd saved up all year to surprise our kids with new play equipment for Christmas, a trampoline, jungle gym, swings, and a play set. We wanted to give them something to get them outside and off screens when summer came around. We live in an HOA neighborhood, which, as many of you probably know, means dealing with a bunch of bored adults who think property aesthetics is their life's calling. Our community has something called a side plane restriction. Basically, you can't have anything visible in your backyard unless it's completely tucked behind the rear line of your house. It's a dumb rule. About 20% of homes here back up to roads, so no matter where you put something, people will still see it. But rules are rules. We tried to push back at first and got shot down, So my wife and I decided to just comply while quietly planning a long game, getting some more reasonable people elected to the board in the next HOA cycle. To move the play equipment behind the house, we had to shift our existing shed to the opposite side of the yard. No big deal, right? Well, moving a shed here means paperwork. And worse, signatures. The HOA requires you to get 4 neighbors to sign off on an application saying you've informed them of your plans. That's it. The signatures aren't approvals, they're acknowledgments. Everyone knows this. Everyone except our neighborhood's reigning queen of chaos, Karen. When I stopped by to let her know about the shed relocation, she immediately started interrogating me like she was running a zoning board hearing. "Where exactly are you putting it?" she snapped. "Just about 10 feet closer to the fence line. It'll open space for the kids' stuff," I said. "Oh, absolutely not. That's way too close to my property. It'll be an eyesore." I reminded her politely that the signature wasn't about agreeing or disagreeing, just confirming she'd been informed. She refused to sign and actually went door to door to pressure one of the other neighbors not to sign either. Luckily, the community's large enough that I found 4 normal adults willing to sign the form. One of them later told me Karen had cornered him in his driveway, calling him spineless for taking their side. Fast forward to the Covenants Committee meeting where they review project applications. I show up early with my paperwork, and there she is, sitting right up front with her arms crossed. When my project came up, she launched into a 10-minute tirade about how moving my shed was disrupting the character of the neighborhood and how children's play equipment devalues nearby homes. She even brought up my screened-in porch, saying it didn't match the rest of the houses. That porch was built 20 years before I bought the place. I kept calm and let her run her mouth until the committee chair finally said, "Thank you, Karen, we'll take that under advisement." They asked me a couple of questions, none serious, and told me they'd email me the final decision. As I was packing up, I overheard Karen asking to review the applications. Technically, the public review period had closed, but I wasn't about to waste energy arguing with her. The next day, I got the committee's decision. Half approved. The shed move approved. The play equipment denied. In part, they said I could keep half of it due to visual impact on neighboring properties. Translation, Karen didn't get her way about the shed, so she complained until they punished my kids instead. I was livid. I immediately filed an appeal with the HOA board and attached a detailed letter outlining every single reason their ruling was nonsense. The architectural guidelines contained no limit on play equipment. The committee themselves said so during Karen's rant. Every neighbor except her was fine with it. There was no visual impact clause that applied to backyards unless the structure was permanent. I also attached a copy of Karen's complaint where she'd literally written, "I just don't want to see it." At the appeal hearing, one of the board members looked up halfway through my letter and said, "Wait, this is about play sets and a trampoline?" I nodded. He sighed and said, "This is ridiculous." The board took about 5 minutes to deliberate before approving everything. Shed, trampoline, swings, the works. The chair even apologized, saying, "We'll be reviewing how personal complaints are handled by the committee moving forward," which is HOA speak for, "We're tired of Karen too." When I got home, I saw her standing outside pretending to check her mailbox as I unloaded my car. She glared and said, "I heard they reversed the decision." Typical. "Yes," I said cheerfully. "Guess they decided fun isn't illegal." She stomped off, muttering something about property values. A few days later, I caught her peeking over her fence while my kids were jumping on the trampoline. I waved. So did my kids. She didn't wave back, but I swear the look on her face when my daughter shouted, "Look, Dad, I can see Karen's house from up here," was worth every ounce of effort. You got exactly what you wanted. Your kids are out there having the time of their lives, and she's stuck glaring through the fence, probably trying to think up a new bylaw about decibel levels of laughter. The cherry on top is your daughter yelling, "I can see Karen's house from up here." And our last story. Neighbor tried to steal a classic car from our worksite. Years ago, I worked for a small renovation company that bought rundown homes, fixed them up, and either flipped or rented them. It wasn't a huge operation, just 3 guys on the crew, including the owner, Dan, and 1 office girl I only saw twice. Dan was one of those guys who didn't need to work. He was already a millionaire from other ventures, but he loved swinging a hammer and playing construction boss. On this particular job, we were rehabbing an old house that had clearly seen better days. The previous owner had been a wealthy older man who, according to the neighbors, had terrible health and an even worse marriage. The guy's younger girlfriend had big dreams of renovating the place after he passed, but his wife swooped in, claimed everything, and sold the property to Dan for cheap. The first few days on site were normal demolition work, tearing up carpet, ripping down drywall, tossing junk. We hadn't touched the detached garage yet, but when we finally opened it up, we realized we'd hit the jackpot. Inside were 3 interesting finds: an old brass fire extinguisher, a rusty 30-foot plumbing snake, and the real treasure, a 1970s Dodge Challenger. It was beat up, missing one tire, and looked like someone had taken a hammer to parts of the engine. The whole thing was coated in dust and spray paint splatter, like some local teenagers had broken in and vandalized it years ago. Dan just shook his head. What a waste. Probably been sitting here since the Nixon administration. We figured we'd eventually haul it off to the scrapyard since there were no keys and the title was long gone, but apparently someone else had different plans. The neighbor, let's call him Rick, must have seen us poking around the garage because he strolled over while we were sitting outside eating lunch. At first he was friendly enough, talking about how the old owner was a hell of a guy, and his tone shifted. "So about that car in there," he said, pointing toward the garage. "Old man told me he was going to give it to me before he passed. I was helping him with the yard and stuff, so it's mine, really. You can just hand over the keys." Dan was still out grabbing food, so I told him we didn't have any keys and honestly didn't even know if the thing could run. Rick's smile vanished. He glared at me, then forced another fake grin. "Come on, don't play dumb. He told me I could have it. You guys got no use for it." "We're just a labor crew," I said, trying to keep it polite. "You'll have to talk to the boss." Rick muttered something under his breath and stormed off. When Dan came back, we told him what happened. He laughed. "That thing? He can have it if he can move it himself. I'm not wasting time arguing over scrap metal." The next morning, Rick showed up again, this time while Dan was there. He demanded the car, claiming it was promised to him. Dan looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you think you can hotwire it, go for it. Otherwise, get off my job site." Rick stomped away, clearly not happy. Later that afternoon, when everyone else had gone home, Rick came back again. This time he started shouting at Dan through the fence, accusing him of stealing his car. Dan had the patience of a saint most days, but that was the wrong moment to test him. He pulled out his phone, called a towing company, and had the Challenger hauled off to the scrapyard while Rick watched. The tow truck driver loaded it up, chained it down, and drove off with Rick standing in the street, screaming every curse word known to man. Dan just looked at him and said, "Next time you want something that doesn't belong to you, maybe try asking the scrapyard. They own it now." Then he told Rick that if he ever came near the property again, he'd call the cops. When I came in the next morning, the garage was empty. "Where's the car?" I asked. Dan grinned. "Somewhere with better company than that neighbor." The rest of the renovation went smoothly, minus the discovery that one room had extension cords wired into the walls and that the ceiling was full of asbestos. We even had one shady guy wander up trying to sell us discount materials until Dan casually mentioned his old connections from a side business he ran back in the day. Let's just say the guy left fast and never came back. By the end of it, the house looked brand new. The nosy neighbor stopped glaring at us from across the fence, probably still stewing over his lost car. Dan sold the property for a nice profit a few months later. As for the Dodge, the scrapyard crushed it, and rumor has it Rick tried to buy it back, but was too late. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. I love that Rick actually stood in the street screaming while the tow truck driver hauled away his prize. Some people just can't stand seeing something they want sitting on someone else's property. Rick thought whining loud enough would make the title appear in his hand. Instead, he watched his dream car turn into a cube. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.